Somewhere in a laboratory, a cabinet door is about to swing open. Behind it, thousands of small, soft, doughy capsules, food, packed and weighed and sealed for a man who is about to leave Earth for 3 months. Nobody in that room knows yet what's really inside them. By the time they find out, the rocket will already be gone, and there will be nothing anyone can do about it. This is the story of the first manned mission to Mars, and of the 4 people who made sure it would never be forgotten, for all the wrong reasons. The meteorologists were right. The weather was perfect. Not good, perfect. One of those rare days that felt staged, as if the sky itself had agreed to cooperate. The wind had swept every cloud out toward the sea, leaving a flawless, merciless blue. The sun crept toward the northern horizon slowly, almost reluctantly, almost like it didn't want to watch what was coming. Because something huge was coming. Thousands of people had arrived by car, by bus, by taxi, flooding the viewing platform behind the wire fence until it was packed shoulder to shoulder, sunburned, restless. Vendors pushed through the crowd hawking cold drinks. Street sellers offered souvenirs, balloons, straw hats. Soldiers and paratroopers moved in slow, constant loops, keeping everyone off the access roads. For now, everything was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that sits right before history changes forever. On the other side of the fence, things were just as tense. Journalists and official representatives stood in small, murmuring groups. A wooden platform had been built at the center of the yard for the television crews. Reporters from newspapers and magazines across Europe and the Americas sat in long rows of folding chairs, and across from them sat more than 200 official guests, scientists, politicians, dignitaries. For the most important visitors, a shaded pavilion had been raised beside the warehouses, and there sat the heads of 3 nations, their ministers, members of royal families. Everyone was trying to stay quiet, trying not to disturb the scientists and engineers still sprinting through their final checks. Then the loudspeakers cracked open. Time T-1 hour. The words landed like a gunshot. The crowd went silent in one motion, every head turning east, toward the rocket standing alone beyond the sand, heat shimmering off its hull until the whole machine seemed to tremble. For one strange moment, it looked alive, like it was already awake, like it was waiting for permission to hurl itself and the man inside it into the black. Security officer Evan Cross leaned against the warehouse wall and ran through every possible disaster in his mind. He had worked security on more than a dozen manned launches, but this one was different. This one had him on edge. It wasn't just important, it was international, a joint project, scientists from a dozen countries. And that meant too many people, too many languages, too many chances for something to be missed, or hidden, or sabotaged. Cross frowned and pushed the thought away. He had done everything possible. For months, every single person connected to the mission had been checked, watched, documented, from the mission director down to the boy who delivered the sandwiches. No risk overlooked. At least, that was the idea.
"Look at that, sir," the driver beside him said, nodding toward a row of chairs near the staff building. "Wives are starting to cry already." He wasn't wrong. A few women dabbed at their eyes. Cross allowed himself a small smile, and then it died on his face. One woman wasn't sitting. She was beautiful, and unlike the others, she stood apart, completely still, rigid, like a statue. Her hands were clenched at her sides, and she stared without blinking toward the desert, where the rocket towered in the shimmering heat. She hadn't touched a handkerchief. She hadn't moved at all. Cross recognized her. the wife of Professor Adrian Whitmore, one of the mission's lead scientists. And for one unsettling second, watching her, Cross had the strange thought that it wasn't Captain Leon Varga who was about to leave Earth behind. It was her husband. He shrugged the thought off. Stress affected everyone differently. Still, something about her bothered him. I couldn't say what. I just knew it wouldn't leave him alone. Inside the control room, Captain Leon Varga sat eating a chicken sandwich, washing it down with milk, looking like a man with absolutely nowhere else to be, certainly not a man with 58 minutes left on this planet. Around him, senior scientists buried themselves in charts and phone calls, faces grim. If anyone else had looked this relaxed, it would have read as arrogance, bravado, sedatives.
Varga wasn't performing. He was simply infuriatingly calm. If he had shown even the faintest sign of fear, the two famous doctors standing near him would have caught it instantly. A psychiatrist stood closest of all, notebook open, pen ready, watching him the way a hawk watches a field. The page stayed blank. There was nothing to write. Varga had been chosen out of roughly 50 volunteers, all experienced astronauts, and very quickly, everyone understood why. He mastered the ship's controls with astonishing speed. He could operate the most complex systems on board and repair them himself if he had to. The medical and physical exams hadn't troubled him at all. 4 Olympic gold medals, one for his small, proud country, had seen to that. In his free time, he hunted bears, alone, unarmed. He cultivated rare orchids. He wrote plays. Latin came easily to him. So did poetry. And to make the whole picture even stranger, he carried a reputation as an effortlessly charming gentleman, the kind of man rooms went quiet for. Time, T-minus 50 minutes. The loudspeaker made everyone in the room flinch. Everyone except him. Varga just smiled at the mission director and said, in casual German, "Don't forget my beefsteaks for the trip. Rare, please."
The director gave a thin smile and moved on. The food for the 3-month mission had already been specially processed into tiny capsules. Even so, the director privately thought they took up too much room, especially with all the protective and heat-regulating equipment still needing space inside the ship. But that wasn't his real worry. His real worry was the temperature control system, the one piece of equipment that had never fully passed its ground tests, still showing a small, stubborn deviation from expected readings. Varga could correct the cabin temperature manually if it drifted. If the correction failed, too. "Get me Whitmore," the director said, and looked out at the rows of distinguished guests and at the towering rocket beyond them. So many people had placed their hopes for the future on that machine. Time, T-minus 45 minutes. Whitmore speaking. "How are the temperature sensors?" the director asked, sharper than he meant to. "Seems fine?" "Seems fine. Professor, do you understand?" He stopped himself. Whitmore understood perfectly. If the sensors drifted and the manual override failed too, Captain Varga would spend his last hours as either a frozen corpse or a boiled one, 3 months from the nearest doctor on Earth.
If you have any doubt at all, there's still time to make adjustments. In my opinion, the sensors are functioning normally. There was something in Whitmore's voice. The director almost caught it. Almost. "Good," he said instead, and hung up. Then his eyes drifted to Varga, calmly finishing his sandwich, and something in his chest loosened. At least the human factor hadn't failed. No wonder the papers called him the supercandidate. In the flight control building, Whitmore ran a pencil down his checklist without really seeing it. Dark circles sat under his eyes, bruises. "You're late, Max," he said, not looking up, as Dr. Max Anders directed 2 technicians loading long metal containers into the cargo lift. 18 seconds, Anders said mildly. Whitmore frowned at the containers. Anders tapped one lightly with his palm, almost affectionately, and told the technician, "Load them." "That's everything then," Anders said. "Yes, of course." They climbed into the waiting jeep. As they drove across the baking sand, Whitmore's voice trailed off mid-thought. Everything was perfect for the supercandidate, wasn't it? Super? Maybe physically, maybe mentally too. Anders raised an eyebrow, said nothing, just watched him.
Time, T-minus 30 minutes.
Vargas stretched and yawned as two Nobel laureates arrived carrying the spacesuit built specifically for him. Time to dress for dinner. Did you fix that stitch in the third layer, gentlemen?
They smiled. The psychiatrist, though, stepped closer, suddenly sharp with interest. What stitch are you referring to, Captain? Oh, nothing. Just something I said. You left no room there at all. No room for what? For the astronaut, Vargas said, switching smoothly into unaccented English. For a woman. He let the silence stretch half a beat too long. 3 months is a long time, don't you think? The psychiatrist wrote something down at last. Perhaps you'll be lonely out there, Captain, without a woman. Vargas smiled, didn't move. Very true, sir, though I'd add, at the risk of sounding immodest, that they'll be missing me too.
Time, T-minus 20 minutes.
Cross was in the corridor when the loudspeaker screamed above him. He flinched, kept walking, face blank. Inside, he was coming apart at the seams. 2 things were bothering him, and they might have been connected. Or maybe not. First, the expression on Professor Whitmore's face when he left the director's office after his final report. Cross had only seen it briefly, but it was enough. Pain. And something worse than pain. Suffering. Second, the woman on the viewing platform, Whitmore's wife, standing there with a look of absolute despair. And then there was the rumor, the one everyone pretended not to repeat, that Captain Varga hadn't exactly given up his romantic interests during pre-launch isolation. Cross didn't believe it. Not really. Not with the level of surveillance on the captain. Still, the rumor stayed lodged in his head, and it wouldn't leave him alone. Outside, the crowd's murmur was swelling into a roar. Varga would be walking out to the Jeep right now. Cross checked his watch and felt the full weight of what he couldn't prove pressing down on him. He couldn't walk up to the director and say, "I have a bad feeling." He needed something real. He knew he couldn't walk up to the mission director and say, "I think something is wrong," on nothing but a look on someone's face. And yet, something was wrong. He'd felt it in his gut for hours now. He pulled Whitmore's file again, read it twice. Nothing suspicious. Nothing at all. Except 2 names listed under closest personal contacts.
Mr. and Mrs. Anders.
He needed more information, now. And Dr. Anders and his wife might know something, if there was anything to know, if there was anything to tell. But there was a problem. He couldn't find either one, until he pushed open a door marked Food Products Laboratory and found it empty. Rows of sinks, cluttered desks, no one. Then Dr. Anders stepped out of the refrigeration room, drying his hands on a towel, and shut the freezer door carefully behind him. "Oh, Mr. Cross, I heard you were looking for me. Just cleaning up in there. Leave it too long and it gets much harder later." Something about the way he said it made the hair rise on Cross's arms. He didn't know why yet.
Time, T-minus 10 minutes.
"Dr. Anders," Cross said, "I need to ask you something personal. I have serious reasons for asking." Anders only shrugged, unbothered, and waited. "You and your wife know Whitmore better than anyone here. Tell me straight, do you have any reason to believe Mrs. Whitmore was unfaithful to her husband, with Captain Varga?" Anders turned to the window, hands clasped behind his back, and let the question hang just long enough to hurt.
"As far as I know,
yes." Cross was already reaching for the phone. "One more thing," he said, dialing. "Whitmore knows. I'm nearly certain of it." Into the receiver. "This is Cross. Find Professor Whitmore. Now, bring him to the Food Products Laboratory." He hung up and pressed a hand over his eyes. "I can't believe it," he muttered. "We watched him, every step." Anders looked almost amused. "And what surprises you, Mr. Cross? You didn't think a supercandidate, if he wanted something badly enough, could slip past your checkpoints?" A short, dry laugh. "Isn't that the interesting part? Not just seducing another man's wife, outsmarting the men paid to stop him. What a temptation for someone who strangles bears for sport."
"I can't believe it," Cross said again, but the loudspeakers swallowed the words whole.
Time, T-minus 5 minutes.
Now everything was in the hands of the automatic systems.
The entire space complex had folded itself into a cold, mechanical kingdom of electronics, a hidden brain whispering a million commands at the speed of light. Levers moved, sensors twitched. Tiny doors slammed shut, one after another, like a held breath. And even now, it could still be stopped. Cross knew the director was sitting in his office right now with one finger a half-inch from a bright red button. It could still be stopped, but at a terrible cost. Once the countless fitted parts had begun moving, a shutdown would destroy half the complex's instruments, delay the launch for months, and cost millions. No, Cross could not walk in there and ask the director to cancel the flight on suspicion alone. He stared at his own clasped hands and barely heard Anders still talking beside him. "You can't believe someone could seduce a faithful wife," Anders said softly. "Don't be naive, Cross. Varga isn't ordinary. He's exactly what they say he is. And in a few minutes, he's leaving on a journey he may never come back from." Anders folded his hands like a man praying. What woman could resist him? A man who comes to her in secret. A man who's already a legend before he's even left the ground.
The laboratory door slammed open. Whitmore stood in the frame, gray hair wrecked, 2 security officers behind him. Cross rose so fast his chair scraped the floor. His whole body was shaking now. He could barely control his own voice. "So, yes or no?" Cross snapped. Whitmore's hands went up helplessly. He looked at Anders, but Anders had already turned back to the window. "Yes," Whitmore said. "It's true. She told me last night. But you have to understand." Cross grabbed a fistful of his jacket. "Did you do something, Whitmore? Something that could ruin the flight," Anders finished, flat and dry without turning around. Whitmore tore free and staggered back into a bench full of glassware, cups rattling. "Ruin the flight? Me?" "Yes. Did you sabotage it?" Cross squeezed his eyes shut. Then, impossibly, he started to laugh. His whole body still braced against the bench, head tipped back against the cabinet behind it. No. I had heard about his reputation, with other women, other men's wives. I just never imagined it would be mine. Time, T-minus 60 seconds.
Anders moved closer to Cross, voice steady over the countdown starting outside. "This man isn't lying to you. He had control of exactly one system. Temperature regulation. Nothing else. 59. 58. 57. Everything else is automatic. If anything's wrong, the director already knows. 31. 30. 29. Call him. Ask." Cross's hand was shaking so hard he could barely dial. 20. 19. 18. What if Whitmore had lied? What if Anders had too? What if this was never one man's secret at all? 10. 9. Someone finally answered, refused to disturb the director. Cross swore, pleaded, ordered. 5. 4. The director's voice cracked through at last, thin and strained. "Temperature readings. Are they normal?" "Of course." 3. 2. 1. Cross let the receiver drop from his hand like it had turned to stone. The building shook. Outside, the crowd's roar climbed into one solid wall of sound. Then the sound was gone. Lifted. Carried away. Both officers rushed to the window and watched a pillar of fire climb slowly, impossibly, into the perfect blue sky. 3 men stood frozen where they were. Cross at the table. Anders, 5 feet back, framed in sunlight. Whitmore against the bench, still not quite able to stand up straight. "Well," Whitmore said, voice shaking. "There you have it. Everything went normally." Then, very quietly, almost to himself, "You know, the thought did cross my mind. God is my witness, it did. But I couldn't do it. Not even for that." And then he simply went limp, folding forward, head dropping onto his chest. The cabinet door behind him, the one his head had been resting against, swung open with a soft click. Tiny pills began to spill out, hundreds of them. Then thousands. Soft, pale, doughy little capsules pouring across the floor, bouncing off Whitmore's shoulders, scattering under the benches, filling the room with a sound like falling rain. Cross bent down and picked one up. It was soft, almost warm, like dough.
He looked up at Whitmore. The man had gone the color of chalk, staring past Cross, not at him, past him. My God, Max. Outside, the announcer's voice cracked with joy over the loudspeakers. The first stage has been successful. The first stage has been successful. Cross turned back to Dr. Anders. The chemist's narrow face had folded into something new, something calm, something almost pleasant. He was smiling. "These are the ones," Anders said softly, nodding at the white capsules scattered across the floor like snow. The ones that were supposed to go on the ship. Cross felt the room tilt. "You loaded empty containers?" "Oh no, not empty." Anders's voice never wavered. "They were weighed beforehand, every one of them, loaded to full capacity." Then Cross's mouth had gone dry. "Loaded with what?" "He won't starve, Mr. Cross."
Whitmore was moving now, slow and stiff, toward the open cabinet, until his forehead was almost touching the glass. There was nowhere left for him to go. When he finally spoke, it came out as barely a whisper. Not a question this time, but something closer to a confession. "Max, is it done?" Anders didn't answer. He didn't need to. Whitmore's eyes closed. "Olga," he breathed so quietly only Cross caught it. "I'm sorry, Olga." Anders's pale eyes had drifted past all of them, out through the window, past the desert, past the crowd still cheering itself hoarse, up toward the vanishing white line in the sky.
Toward the black silence beyond it. Toward the ship carrying Captain Leon Varga, the supercandidate, further from Earth with every second. Carrying 3 months of food, weighed, sealed, loaded to full capacity. Cross never got an answer to his question. He never needed one. Somewhere out past the edge of the atmosphere, a man is eating a very rare steak and thinking about the last woman who ever loved him. He has no idea how right he was.